Blood flow, we're doing systemic circulation, right? And we did blood flow from the ascending aorta. What organ is delivered blood from the ascending aorta? What organ? Just the heart. What organ, what regions, sorry, is delivered, what regions are delivered blood by the aortic arch? Head, arms, yeah, primarily, right? And now, of course, we are going to do descending aorta, right? But we'll do descending thoracic, and then go through the diaphragm, and then descending abdominal. Everybody good? Okay. Descending thoracic is really easy, simply because didn't we already take care of the big organs that were in the thoracic cavity? Because we already did the lungs, right? And we already did the heart, right? So there isn't just a whole hell of a lot else in there, yeah? So primarily what gets blood supply from the descending thoracic aorta is the intercostal muscles via the intercostal arteries. By the way, there are several different kinds of intercostal arteries, but they're really hard to see in a 2D picture, so I don't ask you to identify the different ones. But there are, for instance, these are anterior intercostal arteries, and these are posterior, and there's even some supreme ones up here, but just intercostal arteries is fine. But conceptually, even though you can't see them here, I also want you to know that there's two more important things that get blood supply from the descending thoracic aorta, even though it's not in this picture. Does it make sense that that's probably how you would deliver blood to the esophagus? Yeah? There are some branches off the descending thoracic aorta called the esophageal arteries, and they deliver blood to the esophagus. Everybody okay with that? Okay. And there are portions of the respiratory system that do not do gas exchange with the air, and so they need systemic blood, like the bronchs and the bronchioles. Does that make sense? Okay? Yeah? So those aren't getting oxygen from the alveoli, so they need systemic blood. Yeah? So there are branches off the descending thoracic aorta called the bronchial arteries. You can't see them here, but does it make conceptual sense to you? Yeah? So that's how you're actually going to do that. So that's pretty damn easy, right? You don't really have very much to identify there. Now, the venous drainage of the thoracic cavity is a little weird. And it's a little weird because it's asymmetrical. Okay? And it's asymmetrical because it's going to ultimately drain into the superior vena cava, but because the aorta is left, the vena cava are right, okay? That means that if you're draining the right side of the chest, you can kind of do it relatively directly, but if you're draining the left side of the chest, you have to jog over there, okay? So to make this make sense, and I hated it when I learned it too, to make it make sense, what I would do if I were you is draw arrows to show you which direction blood flows through these things. Okay, so let's just do the easy side first, okay? The easy side is basically you're going to take the intercostal veins on the right side, right? And ultimately you are going to dump those into this vessel right here, which is called the azygous vessel, as in azygous, as in unpaired. Zygote, paired, unpaired. Yes? Does that make sense? So that's the azygous. Which direction is blood running through the azygous vein? Up, yes. Up and dumps into the superior vena cava, right? So around, up, dump. Yes? Got it? Okay. Now, if you're on the left side, you don't attach directly to the azygous. You need to make a couple of pit stops on the way. Everybody okay? Okay. Now, there's a lot of variability in venous flow in the thoracic cavity, but here's the general thing that you do. The left intercostal veins will dump. The top ones, the superior ones, usually down to about 8, will dump into this guy right here, which is the accessory hemiazygous, which still accessory hemiazygous dump into the azygous, dump into the superior vena cava. Yeah? Good? Okay. The bottom ones, usually below 8, okay, they actually go, watch, intercostal veins dump into the hemiazygous, but watch where this one goes. It sneaks behind the vena cava and then dumps into the azygous, which dumps into the superior vena cava, right? So if you draw arrows in your picture, you'll actually be able to understand it a little better, to see which direction things are going. Is that okay? Okay. All right. So it's weird, but it's not particularly hard after you look at it once or twice. Okay, so now, of course, we are going to do arterial flow through the abdomen and then venous drainage from the abdomen. So first, we're going to look here. Okay, so when we do arterial flow through the abdomen, we are, of course, going to deliver blood to organs and then deliver blood to organs. So basically, as we go down the descending abdominal aorta, we're going to do digestive, right? We're going to do urinary, then we're going to do legs and junk, right, as we go through. So first, let's look at these branches before we get down to the common iliacs. Let's do the easy ones first. I wonder what this vessel is called. That's the renal arteries, right? They go straight to the kidneys. And if you can't find them, you're probably not going to do super well on the whole hard parts, okay? So these are the renal arteries, right? These guys right here go to the adrenal, also called suprarenal glands, which are part of the endocrine system, okay? And usually the left one goes straight to it, and the right one goes through the diaphragm and then back, but it doesn't matter, really. Okay, there's still the suprarenal arteries. Good? So suprarenal arteries going to the suprarenal or adrenal glands. Good? Okay. And then the other ones that are easy, and then we'll pick up the 3 hard ones in the middle. The other ones that are easy are these 2. The other paired ones. Those are called what? Gonadal arteries, unless you know the sex, and then you don't call them gonadal arteries. Then you call them whatever the gonads are called, right? So in a female, they would be the left and right what arteries? Ovarian. And in a male, they would be the left and right testicular. Yeah. And of course, because the ovaries and the testes are embryologically the same structure, they develop in different hormonal environments. And of course, because in a normally developing anatomic male, the testes are actually going to drop through the inguinal canal. That means that in a normally developing anatomical male, the gonadal, testicular, will be longer than the ovarian, yeah? Just because it has to go down there, right? Okay, so, and we'll talk about sex differentiation in our reproductive chapter. All right, so we took care of those. Those are the left and right gonadal. And now let's take care of the 3 middle ones, okay? And those are the harder ones, but they're really not that bad. Okay, so what I want you to think about is where you're going to deliver blood to, right? Through these arteries. So let's do the big one that's right below the diaphragm, which is of course called the celiac trunk or sometimes the celiac artery. Okay? So the celiac trunk or the celiac artery. Before I show you, I want you to brainstorm and see if you can remember from lab. Tell me the organs that the celiac trunk supplies. Liver. Organs. Stomach. Spleen. And one more. We already did liver. Liver, stomach, spleen, first portion of the small intestine. What's that called? First portion of the small intestine. Duodenum. Duodenum. Or you can say duodenum because nobody can agree. I swear, even anatomists don't agree on that one. Okay? Everybody okay with that? So now let's look what the celiac trunk actually does by looking at its branches. Okay. So the celiac trunk, watch, usually is just below the diaphragm, right? The first one. And it's not as hard as it initially looks as long as you don't try to identify them at the branch point. You actually follow them to where they go. Then it's not very hard. Even on the cadaver, it's not that hard, right? Okay, so you've got 3 big branches, and then one of them is going to branch even further. So let's do the hard one first. This guy right here is going toward the liver, but then it's going to branch. What are we going to call this one? Common hepatic artery, yes? And it's going to have 3 branches. Let's figure out what the branches are going to be called. This one is going to the first portion of the small intestine and wrapping around the greater curvature of the stomach. So what do you want to call it? Gastroduodenal artery. Yes. That makes sense? Okay. This one is wrapping around the lesser curvature of the stomach from the right side. What do we want to call that one? Right gastric artery. Yes? This one is actually going to the liver. And what are we going to call that one? Hepatic artery proper. Yes? Or proper hepatic artery. It doesn't matter whether you put the proper, right? But it has to have proper in there. And by the way, it will branch into the left and right hepatic arteries. They're kind of hard to see, and sometimes they don't ask them in lab. I won't ask you in lecture. It's just a little hard to see the difference. But they do branch into the left and right hepatic arteries. Good? Go ahead.
Those are all from common hepatic, right?
Yes, from the, well, no, celiac gives rise to the common hepatic. Common hepatic gives rise to the others that we just did, right? The common hepatic gives rise to these 3. The right gastric, the gastroduodenal, and the hepatic artery proper, right? All from common. So celiac trunk, then common hepatic, then branch into 3. Yeah? Okay. All right. So now this little guy right here wraps around the lesser curvature of the stomach from the left side. What do we want to call it? Left gastric. Good. And this guy right here tucks back behind. It's usually really wiggly like that. Okay? And goes to the spleen. What are you going to call it? Splenic. Yeah? Right? That makes sense? So again, like we said with muscles, and I'll reiterate, do not try to memorize vessels at a branch point. Do not say, oh, that vessel runs through. Follow it, right? Right? If it's a vein that's coming from the spleen, it's the splenic vein, right? If it's an artery going to the spleen, it's the splenic artery. So you just need to get in there a little bit to follow them. If you are still one of those people who doesn't touch the cadaver, please get over that. Because you know, living people are more gross than dead people. I just want you to know, right? And sometimes way smellier. Okay, so this is the celiac trunk and all of the branches of the celiac trunk, okay? Kinds of questions I could ask you about any vessel: which direction is blood flowing, what's it supplying, what's the gas content, right? And you should be able to do that in all of those. Good? Okay, next big branch is right back there. In this picture that we looked at before, it would be unpaired, usually kind of medial, coming off of the abdominal aorta, right? Unpaired. And it's going to be the first one and not the second one in almost all of us. Every once in a while somebody has them switch, but pretend that doesn't happen. Okay? This one is called the superior mesenteric artery because it runs through mesentery, and it's the top one. What is mesentery? Who remembers? Mm-hmm.
Like the Ziploc bag that follows your lower or your upper intestine.
It follows both of them. So remember at the beginning of the semester when we were learning about serous membranes, remember when you were like, oh, that's hard. And now you're like, what the hell? Okay, so we got an organ, right? And I got a serous membrane. The serous membrane, visceral wraps around, parietal wraps around here. This portion is mesentery. That's a really good place to give blood flow from the body wall. Yeah? So the superior mesenteric artery runs through the superior portion of the mesentery, primarily to the small intestine, a little bit large too. And then you're going to have another chunk of mesentery that suspends most of the rest of your colon, your large intestine, from the body wall. That's the inferior mesentery, and it's going to have an inferior mesenteric artery and vein going through it. Does that make sense? Actually, the vein doesn't go through it. Goes through it for just a minute, and then it pops out. Everybody okay? Okay, so got it? Okay, all right, so let's look at the superior mesenteric artery. I want to, even though this picture doesn't show it, I want you guys to be able to conceptualize what the superior mesenteric artery is going to supply. Does anybody know what it supplies?
The small intestine and the superior part of the
Yeah, the proximal portion of the large intestine. So whatever I didn't supply from the small intestine already, and the only thing that I took care of was the duodenum, right? Right? So the entire rest of the small intestine is from the superior mesenteric artery, and then the proximal portions of the large intestine. So the small intestine is all cut off here, but FYI, what happens is this gives rise to a whole bunch of little arteries called intestinal arteries that go through the mesentery and supply all the different branches of the small intestine, all the different portions. Good? But then it also supplies the proximal portions of the small intestine, the large intestine. And the large intestine goes proximal portion closest to the small intestine, ascending colon, transverse colon, descending colon, sigmoid colon, rectum. Good? Okay, so which portions does the superior mesenteric supply? You can see, right? Ascending and transverse primarily, although there's a little overlap right here, right? A little bit of anastomosis between those two, right? Do you see? But primarily it's ascending colon and transverse colon. Everybody okay? So now, logically, what does the inferior mesenteric artery supply? The rest of the large intestine. Tell me what the rest is. It's descending and then sigmoid colon. Yeah, and you can see it going to the descending and the sigmoid colon. Do you see that? Okay. Now, it doesn't supply the rectum, but the rectum is supplied by your internal iliacs. We'll get that later. But everything in the gut we just basically supplied. Okay? Okay. All right. So that's arterial supply. Now, the venous drainage is weird. But today I don't want you to just acknowledge that it's weird. I want you to be able to explain why it's weird before we leave this topic. Okay, so venous drainage is all ultimately going to end up in the inferior vena cava, right? The venous drainage of the abdominal cavity, right? Okay, but some organs drain directly into the inferior vena cava, and some organs actually go through the liver first and make a pit stop. So let's do the easy ones first. The easy ones are going to drain either directly or almost directly into the inferior vena cava. So these are your renal veins. They're big honkers. They drain directly into the inferior vena cava. These guys right here are your gonadals, unless you know the sex. Usually, the right gonadal dumps into the inferior vena cava, and usually the left gonadal dumps into the renal. This kind of crap I don't really care about. A, it's a variable between people, and B, the anatomical anomaly is not particularly meaningful. It's just like that, right? So I don't really try to trick you about crap like that, okay? And this one too, right? Quite often, the left suprarenal vein dumps into the renal, right? And the right one dumps directly into the inferior vena cava, okay? But I don't really care very much about little things like that. Unless the anatomical abnormality is functionally meaningful, I'm probably not going to try to ding you on it, okay? And the functionally meaningful anatomical abnormality will, of course, be the hepatic portal circulation. So that will matter. The reason it's weird is important. Okay, so there's some others down here, but you guys don't have to know the rest of them. So please note that you do not see an inferior mesenteric dumping into the inferior vena cava, or a superior mesenteric, or a splenic dumping into the inferior vena cava, okay? Because, of course, they have a different circulatory pattern because they use hepatic portal circulation. So I want you to understand the reasons behind hepatic portal, and I'm going to go ahead and tell you flat out that I love hepatic portal circulation. I love it. I love it. Okay, so let's talk about hepatic portal circulation. You ready? But before we get into the specifics, I want to look at the forest before we get into the trees. I want to talk about why on earth you do not dump the venous blood from your digestive organs. We'll talk about the spleen in just a second, but especially from your digestive organs directly into your inferior vena cava to then go right back to your right atrium and pump it everywhere. Okay? And it's because, of course, the food that we eat is not sterile. Yes? It has potential toxins in it. It also has potential pathogens in it. You have eaten pathogens in your food and not gotten sick. And the reason you have eaten poop spinach before and not gotten E. coli poisoning is because you actually send all of that blood through a security station, the capillaries of the liver, before it goes back into circulation. You with me? Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take all the blood that absorbs stuff from the digestive tract, large intestine, small intestine primarily, right? And all of that blood, I'm going to funnel it through the liver before I dump it back into circulation. I'm going to funnel it through the liver from the bottom to the top. Who remembers what kind of capillaries we have in the liver that will make sure that you get a good look at that blood? Sinusoid capillaries. Wide, holy, circuitous, really, really bendy, right? So it's going to go really slowly through the liver, right? So you're going to catch that poop, spinach, E. coli, right? You're going to catch the toxins, right? Before you dump it back into, ultimately, the inferior vena cava, right? Does that make sense? Okay, so we are going to talk about blood flow through this. And if you didn't see it in lab or get it in lab, make sure that you get it right now. So do you see the chair? Do you see the chair picture? Okay, if you don't, let me show it to you. Okay, so, I've got, here's the back leg of the chair. Yes? Here's the back of the chair. Here's the seat of the chair. Here's the front leg of the chair. Yeah? It's basically a side view of the chair. Does that make sense? Okay. It's got a couple other vessels. We don't usually make you learn those, but let's learn the vessels of the chair. Okay? And in each one, I want you to think about the organ that it's draining and the direction of blood flow. Okay? So, seat of the chair. What is this vessel called? Splenic what? Splenic vein. Which direction is blood going through the splenic vein? That direction. What organ is it draining? Spleen. Yeah, that was hard. Okay, so I'll talk about the spleen. Most people don't know the function of the spleen, but we'll get to it in just a second. Okay? All right. What is this front leg? What is it called? Inferior mesenteric vein. Which direction is blood going through it? Up. What organs is it draining? Nope, inferior. Distal portion of the large intestine, primarily descending in sigmoid colon. You do a lot of lipid absorption and water absorption at the sigmoid and descending colon. Okay, everybody okay with that? All right, so what's this vessel called? Superior mesenteric vein. Which direction is blood flowing? Up. What's it draining? Everything but the duodenum in the small intestine and in the proximal portions of the large intestine. Small intestine does most of your absorption, right? Almost everything. The large intestine is kind of limited at what it can absorb, okay? And then when they all come together, there's this big wide vessel. What's this one called? Hepatic portal vein, not hepatic vein. You have to get portal in there, okay? Which direction is blood going through there? Up. Okay, and this chair has a big old pillow on the top because that's the liver, right? Everybody okay? We'll talk about why it's called the portal vein in just a second. You are going to deliver blood to the liver from the bottom, okay, through the hepatic portal vein. It's going to go through the liver, and then ultimately it's going to dump into the inferior vena cava, which I'm just drawing dashed because it runs behind there, okay? And it's not going to dump directly, it's going to dump into the inferior vena cava via these two vessels. What are these called?
Hepatic.
Yeah, these are hepatic veins. Okay, so I want to address a couple things. And first I want to address the concept of a portal vessel. So, portal vessel breaks the rules of circulation, because here is how circulation generally goes, right? You start at the heart, you go heart, arteries, arterioles, capillary bed, venules, veins, heart, yes? This breaks that rule, because it goes heart, arteries, arterioles, capillary beds, portal vessel, capillary beds, venules, veins, heart. Do you see that what this is doing is sticking two sets of capillary beds in series so that everything that went through the first one gets forced through the second one before it goes back into circulation? Yeah? Right? So this is forcing all of your digestive and also your splenic blood to go through the hepatic capillaries on their way. And as they go through, what happens is, remember your big old macrophages? They're looking, see if there's any poopy coli in there. Whoop up on it, right? Slowly, methodically, right, as it goes through these capillaries before you send it back into circulation. Does that make sense? So the blood in the hepatic veins should be different than the blood in the hepatic portal vein. Yeah? Does that make sense? We have to add one little thing here. It's not actually part of hepatic portal circulation, but it's a part of the story. Because, of course, this is showing us the liver receiving venous blood, deoxygenated venous blood. But we know that the liver is a systemic organ, and it also has to receive oxygenated arterial blood, yes? Or else it wouldn't be able to do its job. So, which vessel, again, delivers oxygenated arterial blood to the liver? Which branch specifically goes to the liver? Yeah, hepatic artery proper. Okay, this is weird. This means that you have mixed blood dumping into a common capillary bed. I've got high oxygen, low nutrient, low toxin blood, right? And I've got high nutrient, potentially high waste, low oxygen blood, all dumping into the same capillary beds. And as it goes through the capillary beds slowly, right, here's what happens. You take out all the bad stuff, hopefully, right? But you also need to take oxygen because you need it for cellular respiration, right? Take the oxygen out. Everybody good with that? Okay. You're going to shove carbon dioxide in as needed, right, from the liver. Okay. The liver is also going to get first dibs on nutrients. Yeah, because it's going by there, and you're going to take some amino acids if you need them, some glucose, some fats if you need them. You're not going to take more than your share, but you're going to get first dibs on nutrients as it goes through, right? Does that make sense? So as it percolates from the bottom to the top, both the gas, the nutrient, and also the oxygen content will change as it goes through the liver, okay? So here's my challenge to you, and I'm not going to do it for you, but I'm going to leave it with you, I want you to, before your fourth test, to be able to think about these three vessels and compare what's in them. Not numbers, just high, low, or median, right? Okay, so you're going to compare the hepatic artery proper, the hepatic portal vein, and the hepatic vein, and you're going to compare nutrients, high, low, or median, toxins and pathogens, okay, and oxygen content. And what I hope is by doing this, and it won't take you very long, just think through it. By doing this, you will get a good understanding of the function of the hepatic portal system. Is that okay? Okay. The only thing that I need to add into this is the function of the spleen. Because quite often, people have never actually learned the function of the spleen before. Okay? So let's talk about a simplified function of the spleen. The spleen is, among other things, it's part of the immune system. So let me hit you with a metaphor, right? This is my security station, right? This is potential invading enemy forces. Yes, do you see that? Okay. This is sending in troops and weapons because the spleen, if it encounters any antigens, any pathogens in the bloodstream, it will send antibodies out and also white blood cells out. So do you see what it's doing? So these are sending in potential enemy combatants. The liver already has its internal security forces, but if there was something circulating in my bloodstream, if I, for instance, was septic or had some bloodborne pathogen, right? As the blood goes through the spleen will go, hey, there's invaders in here, and it will send antibodies. Those are those proteins that can whoop up on foreign antigens. And we'll also send white blood cells in, and those will go together into the liver. That's the function of the spleen in the hepatic portal system. Good? Yeah? Okay. So that is hepatic portal system. I think we got everything. There's a couple of other little vessels that are part of the hepatic portal system. I know we didn't drain the duodenum, but there is a vessel that drains into it. There's also one of these guys that actually drains directly in. But the big ones that you have to know are the ones that actually form the chair. There's a few more, though, too. Everybody okay? Okay. All right. So then we just have the easy stuff left. Arterial supply and venous drainage of the pelvis and lower limbs. So as we get to the bottom, right here, the descending abdominal aorta will branch into two vessels that's at its end. What are those? The left and right common iliac, right? And they're common, and they're going to branch into, each one is going to branch into what? Internal and external iliac. Good? Okay. Your textbook has a terrible picture of the internal iliac artery. Like, I had to, cross my eyes to figure out what the hell I was looking at here. So, with this picture, I won't ask you this picture, but it's the only one they've got. What you're looking at is the medial surface of the right os coxa. Yeah? Right? And so, this guy right out here, this is the external iliac, which is delivering blood to the leg, thigh and leg, okay? And the internal iliac, you don't have to know all of those branches, but look what it's doing, right? It is middle rectal, the pudendal, that's your junk, the vaginal uterine, the obturator, the gluteal. Do you see? So it's kind of primarily going pelvic, cavity, and medial, and also a little back here. Is that good? Okay. So that's what the internal one's doing. Notice, by the way, that there's a medial umbilical ligament right there. We're going to talk about that when we get to fetal circulation. That's the remnant of part of your fetal circulation that's left behind in everybody. So don't worry about identifying it from there, but just remember that we actually looked at it. Okay, so I don't generally ask you much about branches of the internal iliac. I do ask you what it supplies, okay? All right, but the external iliac, you can totally do this one. So it is called external iliac, yeah? So common iliac before it branches, then internal and external. External until it goes through the inguinal canal, and then here, what are you going to call it? So easy, femoral. What are you going to call it as it goes behind the knee? Popliteal. What are you going to call it as it goes behind the tibia? Posterior tibial. As it goes in front of the tibia? Anterior tibial. As it goes lateral over by this bone? Fibular. Yeah, it's pretty damn easy, all right? You're like, thank you. Something's finally easy. Okay, even though you didn't have to learn the arches, look at how similar it is to how you do the hand, right? You have some arterial arches that give rise to digital arteries. That's how you deliver blood to your toes. Yes? Arterial arches that give rise to digital arteries. Everybody good? Okay, all right. So that is super duper easy. There's one more big vessel called the deep femoral. We don't have you guys learn that one just because it's hard to dissect out without destroying the muscles, but there's another one that goes in there because there's a lot of musculature in there. Okay, so as far as venous return back from, it's also really easy because there's only 2 superficial veins that you have to learn, and everything else is pretty much parallel to arterial circulation. So even though you didn't have to learn them, you have digital veins in your toes, right? And they give rise to 2 loops of arteries. If anybody's wearing flip-flops, a lot of times you can see the superficial veins on the surface, on the top surface of your foot. You know how the top surface of your foot can be kind of veiny? And sometimes they even have to do IVs on your feet, like down there. Anyway, so you've got some venous arches from the digitals, and then you're going to start to move up. Let's do the deep drainage first. It's the same as arterial supply, except that generally it's paired in the leg and then it's not paired in the thigh. That's usually how it goes. Everybody ready? Okay, so this guy is running anterior to the tibia. Those are the anterior tibial veins. They usually run with the anterior tibial artery, and there's usually 2. Okay, usually those dump into the popliteal. Okay, they can dump anywhere they damn well please, but usually they dump in the popliteal. Okay, and then you've got some that are going behind. These are the posterior tibial, and those usually become the popliteal, right? They just go up and become the popliteal. And then these guys right here that are lateral, dumping into here, those are the fibular veins. And those are usually paired. Each one is usually paired on each side. Good? Okay. And then, of course, as you go behind the popliteal, it's going to become the femoral, right? And then as it goes past the inguinal canal, it's going to become the external iliac, and then you join with the internal to become the common, and then the 2 commons join to become what? Yeah, the inferior vena cava. Okay, so how did you form the superior vena cava? Do you remember? 2 brachiocephalics joined to form the superior vena cava. The 2 common iliacs joined to form the inferior vena cava. Good? Okay, all right. So the only other 2 vessels we have to do is the saphenous veins. And this guy right here is the longest vein in the body, and it's called the great saphenous vein. And it starts right here. Do you see it starts kind of medial to your medial malleolus, or anterior to your medial malleolus, and it runs superficial all the way up the inside of the leg and the thigh. And it usually dumps somewhere near the inguinal canal, right? And this is called the great saphenous vein. Some textbooks call it the greater saphenous vein. It's the same one. I don't know. Some textbooks like it better. I don't know. It's greater, right? So that's the longest vein in the body. Historically speaking, it was very commonly used for bypass surgeries because you could take a chunk out of it and then just stick it right back together because it was long enough that it could actually handle that. They don't do that very often anymore because eventually they figured out that it's actually better to use for a bypass. And a bypass would be if I had blockage in my anterior interventricular artery, right? Because of arteriosclerosis, I got a bunch of cholesterol in there. I can bypass the blockage, attach a vessel directly to my aorta, bypass the blockage, and go into the artery past the blockage. Does that make sense? So you basically sort of jump over it, okay? So historically speaking, they would use the great saphenous for that, but then they figured out, you know what, it's probably better to use an artery to bypass an artery than it is to use a vein to bypass an artery, right? Does that make sense? For the same reason that like they repaired this thing in my head, right? Okay. So they don't do this very often, but still the cadavers that we have were elderly people and their bypasses were years ago, yeah? And most often it's from the great saphenous vein. Now, they're more commonly in dudes. They will use your mammary arteries, which has just been sitting around without a job for its whole damn life, right? So if you need a bypass, you're just like, well, let me have that, right? But in women, they don't usually use the mammary arteries. But they do something cool. They do a different kind of bypass now. They do a bypass that, so let's just say that I had a blockage, right? And instead of taking a whole chunk of a vessel out and then using it to attach to my aorta and then go to that area past the blockage, what if I had an extra esophageal artery? They could just leave it hooked up where it was and actually attach it to the heart past the point that there was a blockage. So they don't have to take the whole thing out. They leave the original arterial circulation hooked up, and then they just bypass to wherever it goes in the heart. So bypasses are more common that way, instead of just taking the whole chunk out. And bypasses are like the simplest kind of like surgery, right? It's just like, here's a tube. So see if the fluid goes through. Yay, we did it. Good. Okay. I'm not saying I'm good at it, but I'm saying there are harder things to do. Okay, so that is the great Saphenous. The only other guy right here is this guy right here that runs behind the leg and dumps into the popliteal and is usually superficial, and that's called the small Saphenous. And I think we have at least one of those on each campus. The superficial veins are harder to keep when you're doing dissections because they want to come off with the skin, right? So, and they're also really easy to damage when you're doing dissection. So a lot of times we'll lose the superficial ones even if we keep the deep ones. Okay, everybody good? All right, so do you guys still think that blood traces are hard? They're not that hard, guys, right? I mean, muscles were hard. Muscles were hard. This stuff is just like, it's the same damn story with a little variation every once in a while, right? So it's really not that bad. Okay, but this might be unfamiliar to you. So I want to go through fetal circulation. I love fetal circulation. It's fantastic. It's also the opportunity sometimes for the first sex education that anybody ever had because we are in an abstinence-only sex education state, and people don't know the proper words to use. And that is not stupidity, that is poor education, okay? So you are not the only person in this room that does not know the difference between a placenta and an amniotic sac or an embryo and a fetus, because I was raised in an abstinence-only education state as well, which is one of the reasons why it has an incredibly high teen pregnancy rate, right? And it's also one of the reasons why when I was teaching college, believe it or not, people would ask me if drinking a whole bunch of Mountain Dew is a good birth control mechanism. Or if tighty-whities are a good birth control mechanism. Or if only girls have diaphragms. I'm like, that's not the same diaphragm. So when I teach you guys fetal circulation and then when we do reproductive system later, I am not assuming that you don't know this, but I know somebody in the room doesn't know it, okay? Just based on my experience, I know somebody in the room. And by the way, ladies, guess who is worse at female reproductive system? Men or women? Women are abysmal. They cannot find the clitoris to save their damn life. I promise you, you will leave this room knowing where the clitoris is because everybody knows where the penis is, and I'm an egalitarian, all right? So you are going to know where it is. All right, so before we get to that, let's talk about fetal circulation. So here's the picture from your textbook right here. I kind of like the other one better, though, because it's a little simpler and a little bigger. Okay, so first thing is to address the obvious. Of course, when a fetus is developing, yes, when a fetus is developing, the fetus's lungs are not uniquely functioning compared to the other fetal organs. Does that make sense? So they're not doing gas exchange differently than the other organs, right? So do the fetal lungs need different blood in the way that my lungs need different blood than my systemic organs? No, they just need blood, right? They need systemic blood. They need oxygen being delivered to them, and they need nutrients being delivered to them. Does that make sense? Okay, so the deal is, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to do a couple of little things to keep the fetal heart from being two separate pumps and make it into really one pump, right? Okay, and then we're going to have to deal with, okay, well, if the fetal lungs aren't doing gas exchange, getting oxygen, where is that actually occurring? Where does the fetus actually get oxygen? Gets oxygen from the placenta. But the placenta is not something that most people actually know what it is. And sometimes you think you know what it is, but you actually don't know what it is. So let's talk about it. Okay, my uterus, right here, okay? My uterus is, of course, a systemic organ. It's being delivered right now. Systemic arterial blood, right? Okay, so let's talk about fertilization, pregnancy, and then the development of the placenta, and then we'll start growing this baby and pumping blood, okay? So I'm a uterus. Right? Here are my fallopian tubes. You with me? Okay. Yes? Fallopian tubes, uterus. I don't know what the hell this is. Okay. Fallopian tubes, uterus. So fertilization of her what? Vagina. Right? All the way up my legs. Uterus. Fallopian tubes. Right? Fertilization usually happens right about here. Okay. The sperm has to swim all the way up. Fertilization happens about there. Here's something important physiologically. Fertilization is not pregnancy. Fertilization doesn't change anything chemically or hormonally in the woman, and she doesn't even know that it occurred, right? Her body doesn't know that it occurred. 50% of fertilization events just don't grab on their way out, and they just go straight out the vagina, right? So for instance, if you have 2 kids, you've probably, on average, not you personally, had 4 fertilization events, right? Right? That's not per individual, that's just statistically talking, right? Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so fertilization happens out here around a week-ish. It takes to get down here into the uterus, and then what has to happen in order for a pregnancy to occur is it has to attach to the wall of the uterus. That's implantation. Physiologically, that's pregnancy. Okay? Does that make sense? When that occurs, some hormonal changes occur, but now let's talk about what happens. At that site where implantation occurred, here's what's going to happen. To give it a little while for it to get going. But what's going to happen is it implanted in the wall of the woman's uterus, right? Okay. She is going to start to develop an even richer capillary bed to the wall of her uterus than she had before. Yes? At that site. You with me? And then give it a few weeks, right? And the fetus, after it starts making its own blood, will actually develop a rich capillary bed right next to the maternal capillary bed. Here's the deal, though. I cannot hook the maternal capillary bed to the fetal capillary bed. I can't hook the tubes together. Why? What? Why wouldn't you want to hook fetal and maternal blood flow directly together? Have one continuous blood flow. What? They have to disconnect at some point? What about the genetics, guys? Okay, so my son is half not me. Yes? Half not me. If my immune system detected an invader that was half not me, I would launch an immune system response to that invader. So here's what I need to have. I need to have capillary beds that are never hooked, but super snuggled. Snuggled close enough that you can get gas and nutrient and waste exchange, yeah? But never hooked together. Because if I actually encounter my son's blood type, I will launch an immune system response to him just as if he were a pathogen. Yes? So what I need is I need them to snuggle super duper close, really, really lots and lots of surface area, close enough that I can deliver oxygen and it will diffuse from my bloodstream into his. He can deliver his waste products and carbon dioxide from his bloodstream into mine, but never actually hook them together. So this disc-shaped, weird-ass looking structure on the wall of the uterus is called the placenta. Yeah? Yeah? It's called the placenta. Yes? Okay. It is so weird looking. Has anybody ever seen the placenta? Did you get to see it? I totally got to see mine. I made sure that I did. Yeah? Yeah? You did?
My husband saw it and said it looked like a giant tongue.
It is so freaking weird looking. So I was super doped up.
Pancake.
Huh?
I thought it was like a big bloody pancake looking thing.
It is, yeah, we've got one in the Redwood campus because one of my students had a baby and donated her placenta to me. So it's over there. When you guys get to the reproductive system, it's labeled placenta. It's all fixed in formalin, so it's not pathogenic or anything, don't worry. But you can see it's a disc-shaped structure. It develops at the site of implantation. The maternal capillaries stay stuck to the mom, but eventually you will figure out as we go through the story that you're going to have to pull the placenta off the wall and deliver it. I was all doped up, but I told my doctor, I was like, you save that for me because I want to see that thing, right? And he was like, you're so damn weird, but it's not like I didn't know that before. Yes, I will save it for you. And he brought it in a cooler. He's like, here you go. I'm like, okay. So it's a disc-shaped structure. It's stuck to the wall of the uterus at the site of implantation, okay? The placenta's job is to allow for communication between the mother's bloodstream and the fetal bloodstream, good? But not hook them together, okay? So what we are going to do is we are going to talk about how this occurs. Okay, so pregnancy, yes, pregnancy occurred. My pregnancy, I had 3 miscarriages. I was definitely going to take good care of this one. Took every damn vitamin, ate the best food, worked out all the damn time, tried to deliver a whole bunch of oxygen, took care of this little baby. Okay, so what we hope is happening during a pregnancy is we are delivering very oxygen, nutrient-rich blood to the entire maternal systemic circulation, including the uterus, yes? Including the uterus. So I just want to follow oxygen because, of course, oxygen, carbon dioxide will show you where they're high and low, but also we're going to think about wastes and stuff in just a second. So this is the figure from your textbook. So you have this one. All right. So this was stuck to the wall of the woman's uterus. This whole damn picture is in the uterus, yes? This is a baby. It's not very cute because babies aren't cute without their skin on, okay? Now, what's the difference between the placenta, this thing right here, and the amniotic sacs? Okay, this baby was aquatic. We all were. It had a big old amniotic sac going all the way around it, and it was like swimming in this little amniotic sac, but the amniotic sac goes around the baby. The placenta is outside the amniotic sac, yes, but it's inside the uterus. Good? So basically you got some little bubbles in there, right? So you got a uterus, you got the placenta going to the wall, right? The umbilical cord going from the placenta into the sac to the baby, and the umbilical cord right here goes in through its cute little baby button, belly button right there. Yes? Okay, it's not that cute, but on a baby it is after it heals. Okay?
So that's why your water breaks?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so we're gonna go in, ready? Okay, so I just delivered nice, rich oxygen to my uterus and all of my systemic organs. And what's gonna happen is that oxygen, we'll just follow oxygen, but the nutrients would be going with it. You with me? Okay, so the oxygen is going to diffuse down the concentration gradient from the maternal capillaries, but oxygen is lipid soluble. Remember phys people, okay? It goes straight through my capillaries into his capillaries, right? In the placenta, and then from the placenta it is going to go toward the fetal heart through this vessel. All of these vessels are named with reference to the fetal heart. So this highly oxygenated vessel right here is called what? The umbilical artery or vein? It's a vein because it's going toward the fetal heart. Yes? It's named with reference to the fetal heart. Is that okay? So that's an umbilical vein. It goes through the umbilical cord. Umbilical cords are also weird as hell looking. Right? They look just like this, just all ropey, and there's like one big one with a couple wrapped around. It's the weirdest damn thing. Okay, so this goes through, and it actually goes through the umbilicus, the belly button. Okay, here's what it does after that. It delivers this nice, rich, oxygenated blood into the baby's inferior vena cava, which is where it mixes. So the only vessel in this whole story that will have really, really high oxygen blood is going to be the umbilical vein. And we'll talk about how the baby compensates for that mixing in just a second, okay? So we're going to deliver it into the inferior vena cava, right? And the inferior vena cava goes where it goes, which is which chamber? Right atrium, right? But we do not need a disproportionate amount of blood going to the lungs. We need blood to the lungs, right? But it's not doing anything special or different compared to the other organs, okay? So we need some of the blood to go right atrium, right ventricle, lungs, but we need a lot of it to actually go right back into systemic circulation, classical systemic circulation. So instead of sending a disproportionate amount of blood out the pulmonary trunk to the lungs, I send some of it through a hole between the left and the right atria over into the left side of the heart, right? So now I've kind of made it into one pump instead of two. What is the hole called when it's open? Foramen ovale when it's open, right? And it allows the thing to function as one pump instead of two, right? So some of the blood goes to the lungs, some of the blood goes into classical systemic circulation, okay? So now both ventricles contract and you send blood into the aorta and into the pulmonary trunk, but then they have the opportunity to mix one more time. There's one more site of mixing, which is the aortic arch, and the pulmonary trunk have an artery that connects them during fetal circulation. When it's open, it's called the ductus arteriosus. Ductus arteriosus. What's it called when it's closed? Ligamentum arteriosum. That's a leftover fetal structure between the aortic arch and the pulmonary trunk. Is that okay? Okay, all right. So here's what I'm going to do. I have to deliver blood to all of the fetal organs, right? And you're going to get them there just by the same mechanism you normally would, all the story that we just told, okay? So you go to the lungs through the pulmonary arteries, right? And we come back. It's just different blood than it was before. But during systemic circulation, in addition to delivering blood to all of the fetal systemic organs, we also have to deliver it back to the placenta, okay? So let's figure out how we're going to do that. Ready? So I'm going to go out the left ventricle into, of course, the ascending aortic arch and then descending aorta, okay? Do all the stuff that it just did, right? but I am also going to deliver blood back to the placenta. How am I going to get there? Go descending aorta through common iliac, then internal iliac through these guys right here, which are the umbilical arteries that you don't have anymore but are left behind as ligaments. Okay? These will go out the fetal belly button, yeah, down the umbilical cord and deliver the blood back to the placenta. Does that make sense? Okay. And when you deliver the blood back to the placenta, you are delivering low oxygen, high carbon dioxide, high waste blood. Because not only are the fetal lungs not functioning any special way, neither are the fetal kidneys, and neither is the fetal digestive tract or the fetal liver. So literally what the mom is doing for this baby is room service, yeah, and taking out the trash, yes? Deliver oxygen and all the nutrients straight in, right? And then they just dump the trash and you just take it right back out for them. So how do you get rid of the carbon dioxide that was generated in the fetus? Well, I breathe it out. How do I get rid of the nitrogenous waste products like urea and uric acid that was generated in the fetus? I pee it out, yeah? How do I get rid of anything that needs to be broken down or detoxified? My liver breaks it down, yes? So you need to buy your mom a present on Mother's Day. That's all I'm saying, okay? Because no matter how cool dads are, we got 10 months on them. It ain't 9 months, it's 40 weeks. Last time I checked, that was 10 months, okay? Everybody okay? Did you have a question?
Is that why fetal heart rates are so high?
Yes, okay, so let's talk about how you compensate for this mixing of blood, which would be a problem, right, in an adult? Yes? Okay, so how do you compensate for the mixing of blood since I don't have good, high oxygenated blood going into everything? Well, I just pump it faster. So the fetal heart rate, a healthy fetal heart rate is in the hundreds, even when the mother's is nowhere near that, right? But as soon as the baby is born and you get good separation, we'll talk about that in just a second, the fetal heart rate will start to go back down. Yes? So this is fetal circulation, which I love. I love fetal circulation. It's a good, like, do you understand it story. Go ahead.
The Foramen Ovale, isn't there just a Foramen Ovale? Did they just share the name?
I don't, Foramen Ovale?
Yeah, isn't there, like, in the
It just means oval hole. So it's not that they're sharing a name so much as they're just describing the structure. So between the left and the right atria is a foramen ovale, foramen ovale, right there. And then in the skull, right, you also have one, but it's just an oval hole. That's all that means. That make sense? Good? Yeah, oval hole. Okay, so everybody good? All right, so now let's talk. Go ahead.
Do you know how long it takes for their heart rate to go down to normal?
Well, it starts, well, let me tell you the 2 times that it's going to drop. So first it's going to drop a couple of times. I don't know. Let me look it up. I don't know when it goes down to normal. All small things have higher heart rates than all big things. But it's higher during fetal circulation than it is after newborn circulation. So let me look that up and try to look it up before next time if I remember. But let me tell you what's going to happen once you're born. Okay, so once you're born, at birth, here's what's going to happen. So first off, you know, I mean, some of you guys know this and some of you don't, so I'm not insulting your intelligence. Okay, you're going to give birth through your vagina, generally. Okay, that's not how I did it, but you're going to give birth through your vagina. Okay, the baby's going to come out. The baby is still going to have a pipe hooked to it, right? Okay, and then they're going to stick it sometimes on the mama's belly, right? And then they are going to clip the umbilical cord, right? Okay, clip the umbilical cord and make sure it's sealed so that the baby is not bleeding, okay? So the baby is now disconnected from the mom's circulatory system officially, right? But the mom generally, I mean, sometimes it comes out at the same time, but the mom generally still has the placenta within her uterus. And then she's going to have to deliver that placenta right after it, okay? So the placenta is going to be delivered right after. Sometimes they call that the afterbirth, right? She asked about the water breaking. Usually, I mean, this is really variable how it can happen, but the usual way that it happens is when the baby is full term, right? The amniotic sacs will rupture, right, when the baby gets in position and is full term, and then you're going to have water coming out of your vagina. Well, it's not water. It's amniotic fluid coming out of your vagina, right? That's not directly related to this, but it usually means that the baby is full term and ready to come out. Okay, so she gave birth, And then she has to deliver the afterbirth, okay? And the afterbirth is the placenta with the umbilical cord attached. So when the placenta comes out, it's really, really important to actually inspect the placenta really carefully, because if the placenta stayed in the in the uterus, it gets pulled away from the wall of the uterus, so it's not attached to the fetal blood flow. Of course, it's not attached to maternal blood flow. It's of course not attached to fetal blood flow either. So you get a piece of dying tissue sitting in your uterus, yes? Okay. If you do not get it all out, it's going to cause septicemia and you will probably die. Okay. So she has to deliver it, and then they inspect it really carefully to make sure that it doesn't look like any little chunk of it was left on the wall. There is a little chunk of it left on the wall. They're going to actually do a D&C, which is a dilation and curettage, to clean out the wall of your uterus to make sure that you don't die. Does that make sense? Okay. It's also important for you guys to know if you have pets. Your pets are placental mammals, yeah? Okay, because you don't have a kangaroo, do you? Okay, all right. So since your pets are placental mammals, when they give birth, you should look at the placenta to make sure there's not a little chunk left on there, and if there is, they need to go to the vet to get it taken out. So anyway, so she delivers the placenta or the afterbirth, then the baby's going to start healing, but let's talk about what happens right after the baby is born in most healthy babies. Right after the baby is born, the foramen ovale will slam shut as the lungs inflate and the pressures change in the thoracic cavity. It will slam the foramen ovale closed. In most people, it will stay closed. Yeah, it's not healed yet, but the pressure is keeping it closed until it heals. Is that okay? So it's going to stay closed. When that happens, you get a good separation of most of your systemic and pulmonary blood, right? And the baby will pink up. Yeah, you look for the babies to like pink up in their skin. You also want for them to make a noise because that tells you that their lungs are working. Good. And what they used to do, and they don't do it anymore because it's just mean as hell. That was like literally the worst day of the baby's life. It was all nice and fluid in there, right? And then they were born and it's all bright and noisy, right? And then they used to hold them upside down to get all the fluid out of their mouths and their lungs. And then they'd smack them on the little booty to make them cry. I'm like, I'm so glad that nobody can remember that crap, because that is awful. I don't do that anymore. So the baby will pink up, hopefully make a noise, yeah? And that tells you that you've got a decent separation. And of course, now we have the ability to monitor their O2 sats. And their oxygen saturation will go up pretty high, but not to 100 at that point. But they make you stay in the hospital for a couple of days for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons is that the ductus arteriosus takes 1 to 2 days to close. When that closes, you should go up to almost 100% O2 saturation on the baby, right? And then they're like, oh, they're ready to go home. Yeah, they've got good separation. Does that make sense? Okay, and then hopefully the mom's healing at the same time and everybody gets to go home at the same time.
When they cut the umbilical cord, is there sensory, like can the baby feel that?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, it's not wired up to the baby's nervous system.
Okay.
And you don't feel it either.
No,
Cutting
okay.
the umbilical cord.
And when does the afterbirth, does that just trigger, or do they have to stimulate that to come? Does it just automatically remove?
It depends on the woman. Sometimes they have to massage your uterus to get it out, right? Sometimes it doesn't like to come detached from the wall immediately, and you're going to have to wait for it to do that for just a minute, but they're not going to leave it in there for very long. A lot of times they massage the uterus to get it to move out, right? And so when a woman has a baby, you are yanking the placenta off the wall of the uterus, and you're separating maternal capillaries from fetal capillaries, right? And so there's bleeding associated with it, yes? And that bleeding is the time in which we figured out long after we should have that there actually is a little bit of opportunity for exchange between fetal and maternal blood, because she's bleeding and the placenta's bleeding and the placenta has fetal blood in it, right? The wall of the uterus has maternal blood in it. And this most of the time doesn't cause any problem, but it can. Have you guys heard of RH incompatibility? Okay, so this is just one example of the maternal immune system noticing that there's a foreigner in there, right? So generally speaking, so there's these antigens that are on the surface of your red blood cells. There's a bunch of different kinds. The one we're interested in is called the RH factor. And you can either have it and you're positive, or you can not have it and you're negative. You with me so far? Okay, so I'm RH negative, okay, I don't have it. If my partner, my husband, was Rh positive, then can you see the possibility that I could have an Rh positive baby based on genetics? You with me so far? Okay, he's not. He's Rh negative. But if he was Rh positive and then I had an Rh positive baby, right? My immune system wouldn't usually notice that antigen until I gave birth. Why? Because I didn't actually notice the fetal blood until the bloods met one another, okay? So the first pregnancy with an Rh negative mom and an Rh positive baby usually goes okay. But the second one, right? The second one, I've already ramped up my immune system. It's basically like my immune system has met this antigen, it's made a whole bunch of antibodies for it, it's waiting to whoop up on it if it sees it again. So if I have a second Rh positive pregnancy, yes, it's difficult to carry to term and was a really, really common source of miscarriages, historically speaking. However, now, as long as you're getting good maternal care, you can be an Rh negative woman with an Rh positive partner and have a pregnancy because we've come up with a drug called Rogam, and Rogam actually just masks the Rh positive antigen so that my immune system actually doesn't notice them, right? It's basically like, oh, nothing to see here, I got a hat on, it's not me, go ahead.
That's only applicable for an Rh negative woman?
Rh negative woman, Rh positive fetus.
Because if I'm Rh positive,
then you can have any kind of baby.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're Rh positive, because your immune system is set up to notice the presence of foreign antigens, right? So you can't notice the absence. It's basically like an invader flag. You can't notice the absence of an invader flag, but when you see one, you launch an immune system response against it. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's the whole thing. So you do get potential exchange between fetal and maternal blood, which also, by the way, interestingly, is where they think the difference in the predisposition to autoimmune diseases comes from in men and women. So why do women have autoimmune diseases, all of them, lupus, MS, all of them, celiac, at just quadruple or more rates than men do? Well, the biggest strong hypothesis is that you had a foreigner inside you at some point if you are a woman. And it's, by the way, women who have had children or have had pregnancies that have increased proportion of autoimmune diseases. So what we think happens is during that whole childbirth process, some of those fetal cells go hang out in your body. And then if you have a massive immune system activation, like a virus or something, then your immune system gets hypervigilant and it starts to attack your myelin sheath, or it starts to attack the wall of your intestine, or wherever those cells are. So it sounds like your babies are trying to kill you retroactively, but there's also another part of that that's apparently another thing that having a baby does is actually the baby actually gives you some extra immune system activity as well. So it probably, balances out unless you get a terrible immune system. So everybody okay with this? Do you want to go through the circulation one more time, or you got it? One more time? Okay, one more time. All right, so you guys are going to do it with me this time. Ready? Okay. Where does the fetus get oxygen? Placenta, yes. Okay. So this is inside the mom's uterus, yes? The whole thing is inside the mom's uterus. You are going to pick up oxygen that was delivered to her uterus, yes? Uterine capillaries. You're going to pick it up here. What's the first vessel that it goes through on its way to the fetus? Umbilical vein, yes? And the umbilical vein goes through the belly button, the umbilicus, right? And it's still umbilical vein as it dumps into here, inferior vena cava, right? And then you're going to put it back in the heart. What's the first place in the heart that you get mixing of left-right blood? Foramen ovale, right? From the right atrium to the left atrium, right? So you go both atria to both ventricles and then pump it out of both ventricles. As you pump it out of both ventricles, there is a little artery, not shown really well in this picture. There's a little artery that connects the aortic arch and the pulmonary trunk. Ductus arteriosus, right? And so it allows for more mixing of blood. Now I want to deliver blood to all of the fetus's systemic organs and then back to the placenta. You with me? So I go through what artery? What's this big honker? aorta, right? And then I'm going to deliver it all the way down to, what's the next branch? Common iliac, and then internal iliac artery, right? And then the internal iliac arteries will give rise to these guys. Umbilical artery, which will deliver blood back to where? Placenta. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of things that you have left behind from fetal circulation, okay? What you have left behind from fetal circulation is, of course, the ligamentum arteriosum, right? And then these guys right here, do you remember I told you about these? These guys right here. The medial umbilical ligaments are in your inguinal area, and those are left over from the umbilical artery from when you were little Cletus the fetus.
What are they attached to?
They just kind of go through this area, and they actually go into the body wall, and they're just like, hey, I used to have a job. I don't do anything anymore. Good? So they're like right here. Yeah?
What is that
Yeah.
when they kind of mesh in?
What?
Is there a term for that when it kind of meshes into the skin and the?
I don't know. There probably is. I don't know what it is. Okay, so what else do you have left behind? Did you guys learn the round ligament of the liver? Oh, okay. Well, the round ligament of the liver is this ligament right here. Did you learn the ligamentum teres of the liver? No? Okay. Well, there's a ligament that goes right back here behind the liver, and it's actually the remnant of the umbilical vein right back there. So you got all these little ligaments, and then you, of course, you have the remnant in the heart, right? And that's the fossa ovalis when it's closed. Everybody good? So you understand fetal circulation? It's pretty cool, right? Okay. Now, if you had did anybody go to school in a state in which they actually taught the reproductive system? Yes?
I went to Catholic school, so we didn't talk about it.
Oh, you were in Catholic school. They're like, just don't do it. Where did you go to school? Southern California. Did you have a decent reproductive education? Yeah, that's good. That's good. So here in Utah, we'll talk about the regulations against reproductive education here in Utah, but not only in Utah, interestingly, they have some of the weirdest rules, and I'll let you guys go in just a second, of any state. First off, of course, we're not allowed to teach about birth control, K through 12, which is exactly when you need to learn about birth control, right? You're also not allowed to teach about anything that is not related to procreation. So they don't teach you the clitoris because it's not related to procreation. Yes? You're also, in Utah County has some extra rules. I know you guys are shocked. Shocked, aren't you? You're not even allowed to acknowledge the existence of sex outside of heterosexual marriage in Utah County. Like it doesn't even exist. And in Utah, the biggest one, and the one that only this state does, and it's a huge one, is that, let's say I was a sex educator and you were in 10th grade. If you had a direct fact-based question to ask me, and it's fact-based, not my opinion, right? You're not going to ask me my opinion on masturbation, which, like, who the hell cares my opinion on masturbation? But if you were asking me a direct fact-based question that wasn't in the literature, I'm not even allowed to answer your questions. That's how Utah does sex education. And we are the only state that prevents the educators from answering fact-based direct questions. You can't even write them down, right? So my son, of course, is 12, and he has to do his sex education at the Unitarian Universalist Church after hours so that he can actually learn some things. I'm like, you go there, right? And they have Planned Parenthood educators teaching them all about everything. So just realize that if you're a parent, your kids are going to get knocked up because they don't know what the parts are called. Okay, I will see you guys on... So look for an announcement on Canvas because I'm not quite sure if we're going to do lymphatic or urinary next. I need to look at timing to figure out whether we have time for lymphatic.
I mean, unless you talk to your kids about that, right?
Right, exactly. But think about the generational problem that creates if you've got multiple generations who have no sex education, right? So it's not stupidity if you've never actually learned it, right? It is simply the ignorance that all of us start with about every single subject until you learn the subject. And if there's nobody generationally that learns the subject, then they say, oh, it needs to occur in the home. Well, how is it supposed to occur in the home if you never actually learned it, right? Does that make sense? So I tried to get on, they're developing new science education standards in Utah.